Picture this. You're a Viking raider returning home after months at sea, and the first thing your wife demands isn't your plundered gold. It's proof you remained faithful. What follows is a ritual so bizarre, modern historians still debate its true purpose. This was just one of the shocking sexual customs that governed Viking relationships. Imagine stepping ashore after months of raiding distant coasts, your hands still calloused from oars and axes. The welcome you receive isn't the joyous reunion you expected. Your wife stands before you, her gaze fixed not on the silver in your pack, but on your hands. She suspects infidelity, and Viking law gives her the right to demand proof. The test? Carrying a glowing iron bar 9 paces without blistering your flesh. The ritual was called the ordeal by iron, and failure meant more than shame. A man who dropped the heated metal or showed signs of burning faced banishment or worse. Contemporary accounts describe how priests would first bless the iron before heating it to a visible red glow. The accused would then grasp the scalding rod, walking exactly 9 steps, a sacred number in Norse culture, while witnesses watched for any flinching or hesitation. This wasn't merely about trust. Viking society placed immense value on marital bonds as economic and political alliances. A wife had the legal right to divorce an unfaithful husband and reclaim her dowry, leaving him financially ruined. The iron ordeal acted as both deterrent and divine judgment. Those who passed were deemed innocent by the gods themselves. Psychological terror was part of the design. Even an innocent man faced weeks of agonizing recovery if the gods willed it, while a guilty party risked exposing himself through panic alone. The practice reinforced a harsh truth: honor mattered more than comfort. Surviving the iron testified to a man's discipline under pain, prized in warrior culture. But it also revealed the precarious position of Viking women, forced to wield such extreme measures to secure their standing. If the gods protected the faithful, they also exposed the guilty, until the next raid, when the cycle might begin anew. Yet fidelity tests were just one thread in a larger tapestry of Viking sexual norms. Their marriages began with displays even more violent than glowing iron. The wedding ceremony begins not with rings or vows, but with a blade still damp from battle. You stand before your bride's family, your sword's edge darkened with the blood of a recent kill. This was the munda, the bride price paid not in silver or land, but in proof of your capacity for violence. The more formidable the foe you'd slain, the higher your status in the marriage negotiation. Viking weddings were less about romance than contracts sealed in blood. The groom's sword symbolized his role as protector and enforcer, a man who could defend his household against raids or rival kin. Sagas describe warriors presenting weapons stained from fights staged specifically for this purpose. Some even used the blood of slaughtered animals if no human enemies were available. The message was clear: masculinity meant the ability to spill blood, and marriage required its display. The ritual extended beyond symbolism. A bride's father would inspect the weapon, assessing the quality of the blood and the stories behind it. A blade used to kill a respected enemy carried more weight than one used on a fleeing peasant. This scrutiny ensured the groom could provide security in a society where conflict was constant. Failure to impress might mean the wedding was called off, leaving the man humiliated. But the blood price wasn't just about strength. It reinforced a rigid hierarchy. By accepting the sword, the bride's family acknowledged the groom's dominance over her, a transfer of authority from father to husband. The act mirrored the Viking worldview. Power flowed through violence, and women were its currency. Even love matches required this performative brutality. The implications lingered long after the wedding. A wife knew her security depended on her husband's willingness to kill. This dynamic shaped everything from domestic disputes to inheritance disputes. A man who hesitated to wield violence risked losing respect, and with it, control of his household. Yet the blood price was just one facet of Viking relationships. For wealthy men, marriage wasn't the only way to claim power over women. The practice of taking concubines created a parallel system of control, one where status dictated intimacy. A wealthy Viking's household held a strict hierarchy among women. Wives, concubines, and slaves each occupying a fixed rung. You might own multiple women, But only one could light the ceremonial torch at feasts. Only one could pass her inheritance rights to your children. The others lived in a grey zone, their status higher than slaves but lower than wives, their children legitimate yet secondary. This was concubinage, and it shaped Viking society as much as any raid. Legal codes drew sharp lines between wives and concubines. A wife's marriage was sealed with witnesses, dowries, and the blood price. A concubine needed none of these. She could be acquired through purchase, capture, or voluntary arrangement, but her position always depended on the man's whim. Sagas tell of chieftains discarding concubines after years of service when political alliances demanded new marriages. No ceremony marked these endings, just silent demotion to the slave quarters or outright sale. The system served two purposes. For elites, concubines displayed wealth like finely crafted swords, visible proof a man could support multiple dependents. A chieftain with 6 concubines commanded more respect than one with 2, but concubinage also controlled women's autonomy. Freeborn women who became concubines forfeited legal protections, while enslaved ones had no choice at all. Their children inherited only if the father acknowledged them, creating an underclass of half-siblings competing for scraps of recognition. Economic incentives reinforced the practice. Concubines labored alongside slaves in textile production, brewing and farming. Their unpaid work amplified a household's output, while their bodies produced future workers. Some accounts suggest ambitious families used concubines strategically, breeding sons to expand kinship networks without the obligations of formal marriage alliances. Yet the concubine economy had costs. Rivalry between wives and concubines simmered in longhouses, erupting in poisoned meals or cursed loom weights buried in doorways. Inheritance disputes plagued prominent families, as sons of concubines challenged their half-brothers' claims. The system's instability mirrored its cruelty. Men built power on relationships they could dissolve with a word. But these domestic tensions paled against the violence inflicted on women outside the household altogether, those taken not as concubines, but as spoils of war. The next chapter of Viking sexuality was written not in hearth-lit longhouses, but on bloodied raid beaches. The smoke still rises from burning villages as you drag captives toward the longships. Women stumble in chains, their fate sealed the moment your axe breached their settlement's gates. Viking raids weren't just about plunder, they were about domination. And sexual violence served as its bluntest instrument. Contemporary accounts describe women hauled half-naked across beaches, their clothes torn as trophies. Monastic chronicles from raided coastal towns tell of mothers dashed against rocks when they resisted. Daughters separated into groups for distribution. The psychological terror was calculated. Survivors spread word of Viking cruelty, making future targets more likely to surrender. Raiders knew fear traveled faster than their ships. The treatment of captive women followed grim patterns. Attractive ones might be kept as concubines, though kept often meant repeated assault during the voyage home. Others faced public violation before being sold in foreign slave markets like Dublin or Kiev. Sagas reference thralls forced to service entire crews, their bodies becoming communal property. Resistance brought mutilation, broken fingers for spinners, scarred faces for those who bit. This wasn't random brutality. Sexual violence reinforced hierarchies. By stripping captives of autonomy, Vikings demonstrated total control, a lesson for both victims and witnesses. Even the act of transportation had symbolic weight. Forcing women to row their own chains toward bondage mirrored the Norse belief that the weak existed to serve the strong. Archaeology confirms the practice's scale. Mass graves at raid sites show disproportionate numbers of young female skeletons with fractures consistent with restraint. Some Baltic trading posts reveal pens where captives were stockpiled like livestock before auction. The Dublin slave market's records note seasonal price drops when Viking fleets returned, flooded with new inventory. But sexual violence wasn't merely transactional. It was woven into cultural norms. Skaldic poetry boasts of raiders taming resistant women, framing assault as conquest. Laws treated captive pregnancies as property disputes. Children born of rape became the owner's assets. The message echoed across centuries. Bodies were territories to be claimed. Yet within this darkness existed rituals that flipped the script. Some ceremonies gave sex a sacred dimension, not as a tool of subjugation, but as a bridge to the divine. The bonfires blaze as the procession winds through the fields, the scent of roasted grain thick in the air. At the center stands the chieftain's wife, her cloak shed to reveal a ritual tunic. The crowd's chanting rises as she lies in the freshly plowed soil, a living offering to the gods. This was the blot, where sex transcended privacy to become a conduit for divine power. Viking fertility rites turned intimacy into communal spectacle. During planting seasons, high-status couples performed ritual intercourse in fields, their union believed to transfer vitality to the soil. Witnesses threw grain as the couple copulated, shouting blessings to Freya, the god of fertility. The act wasn't erotic, but functional, a sacred duty to ensure harvests. Sagas describe similar rites at temples, where priestesses channeled goddesses through sex with chosen men. Those selected gained prestige. Refusal risked accusations of insulting the gods. The rituals reinforced social hierarchies. Only elites could embody divine forces, commoners merely observed. A chieftain's public performance affirmed his connection to the supernatural, while his wife's participation displayed her role as life-giver. Archaeologists find phallic amulets buried in crop furrows, suggesting some rites used substitutes when human participants were unavailable. But these ceremonies had dark underpinnings. Captive women sometimes served as stand-ins for goddesses, their participation coerced under the guise of piety. The line between sacred duty and exploitation blurred. A slave's ritual role didn't elevate her status. Once the chants ended, she returned to servitude. The paradox defined Viking sexuality. Acts of violation coexisted with rites of reverence. Sex could symbolize both the highest spiritual connection and the basest domination. Warriors who raped prisoners on raid beaches might later kneel before priestesses in temple rites, seeking blessings through controlled intimacy. This duality shaped their worldview. Fertility rituals celebrated creation, while raids embodied destruction. Both served the same goal: survival through power. The Vikings saw no contradiction, only necessity. From iron ordeals to temple rites, their sexual customs exposed a culture where bodies were battlegrounds. Whether wielded for control or communion, sexuality was never just personal. It was political, economic, and above all, transactional. The legacy lingers in discoveries like the decapitated body of a young woman found in a Danish bog, her hands tied with ropes of human hair. She may have been a sacrifice, a slave, or both, one fragment in a mosaic of calculated intimacy. The Viking world measured intimacy in power, fidelity proven through burns on flesh, marriage purchased with blood-stained steel, fertility rituals draped in sacred violence. Every act served a brutal calculus. Control of women meant control of futures. Their customs wove sex into the fabric of conquest, binding pleasure to hierarchy. These weren't private matters, but public performances, reinforcing who ruled, who obeyed, who lived as property. To understand Vikings fully, you must see beyond their axes to their beds. Their legacy lives in the unmarked graves of thralls, the silent stories etched in bone. If these hidden histories compel you, join us as we keep uncovering the past, one revelation at a time.